What's going on? This is Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler. Week 4. We're here. We're about to close out the first month of the fantasy football season, and we're here to talk about defensive streaming options. The defenses and special teams that you can use to get an edge on your league mates. And this video is not for everyone. If you have the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, you can click this off. San Francisco 49ers defense, go ahead, click it off. New York Jets defense, I'll see you later. Enjoy your week. Congratulations on your defense. And if you have that Houston Texans defense, even though they struggled against Minnesota, we told you to grab them weeks ago. This is going to be a big time, like, get right game. Jacksonville can't score on anyone. They're averaging 13 points per game. So if you have like those 4 defenses, go ahead, turn it off, have a nice weekend. We'll see you later. But there's other teams where even if they're a strong defense, you might consider not using them this week. We told you to grab the Minnesota Vikings for several weeks. Now, this week, they have a tricky one. It's in Green Bay. Buffalo is destroying everyone defensively, back-to-back complete beatdowns, a real hatred of the state of Florida from these Buffalo Bills. Woodshedded the Jacksonville Jaguars, woodshedded the Miami Dolphins, but they've got a weird one in Baltimore. Baltimore's defense you're probably not using in that game either. So even with a strong defense on your roster, you might still consider streaming. And defensive streaming is one of the edges we have as fantasy managers. It takes a little bit of work and it takes a little bit of grinding, but it can provide you a league up where you can get that extra win, that extra boost, that extra 10 points, that extra 7 points that might push you over the edge from winning and losing on a given week. It's a weekly game, so we're going to grind. We're going to go through. We have accountability here, though. This is not just me like, hey, start these defenses. Let's talk about the defenses I recommended last week. I'm going to take an L. The one defense I really, really liked last week was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That game, the script completely flipped on its head. I thought that one was going to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team completely controlling a Denver Broncos team. That game was actually flipped on its head. We're going to keep a watchful eye on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. Their offense might be a little overrated right now, going from week 1 where they smacked Washington to a 20-point scoring outburst against a strong Detroit Lions team, but only 7 points last week. We're going to keep an eye on that Tampa Bay team. They might be a team we end up streaming against coming up. Let's talk about a couple of other defenses, though, that did very well for us. Minnesota, we begged you to add them for weeks. This is a Minnesota defense is looking fantastic. They lead the NFL in sacks. The Brian Flores-led Minnesota Vikings defense is phenomenal. They beat the 49ers. Now they beat the Texans, and the Texans game wasn't even close. A complete annihilation. It did not look like a DeMeco Ryans, CJ Stroud-led Texans team, completely overwhelmed against this Minnesota Vikings team. Minnesota has a chance to go to 4-0 for the first time since 2016 with Sam Darnold behind center. That defense is rolling. So that's one where, we had a big win recommending them last week. We recommended the Green Bay Packers defense last week. They did well, got the win over Indianapolis. That defense is actually rising up. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. And then the Seattle Seahawks defense, we've recommended for 3 straight weeks as a streaming option. We finally saw it sort of all come together. 24-3 win this past week against Miami. That was sort of a low-hanging fruit one. We streamed against Skylar Thompson. It doesn't have to be complicated. We're not doing rocket science over here. We're helping you win fantasy football games. So that was a great one. And then Vegas. We gave like a little caveat. We're like, we really were excited about streaming this Vegas defense against Bryce Young. And then Carolina pulls the rug out from under us and puts in Andy Dalton. So that's one we should have gotten off of. But it's still, I think, decent process to stream against quarterbacks coming off of the bench. A lot of times it takes them a little while to get their feet set. It doesn't always work. You get burned in certain fashion, but that one will take an L. So really sort of a mixed week. We gave you 3 really good ones and 2 not so good ones. But we'll take it. Well, we're looking to do a little bit better than 3-2 here. We have our threshold for what kind of teams we're looking for every week here on our defensive streamers video is I want to talk about defenses that are available in 60% of Yahoo leagues. So when I talk about that number, it seems a little bit high, but when it comes down to it, most people don't roster two defenses. But we can talk about rostering two defenses in certain situations. If you are in a deeper format, like a 20-man bench format, this year especially, with some of these horrendous offenses out there, there's a chance that we want to be streaming, stashing defenses so we can get a leg up a week ahead. And a couple of those teams right now, I mean, there's just some really, really poor offensive play right now in the NFL. Miami's averaging 11 points per game. New England is averaging 13 points per game. Jaguars averaging 13.3 points per game. And then you've got some offenses that like are also really struggling, like Cleveland, sub 17 points per game. Atlanta Falcons, sub 17 points per game. Tennessee Titans at 16 points per game. So there's a massive disconnect between the haves and the have-nots, and we're going to look to exploit that every single week. So we went over last week's defenses and how they performed. Let's talk about defenses that can help you out this week. And we've got to start at the top, and it blows my mind. Like last week, we talked about how we are not going to have an opportunity to roster the Minnesota Vikings much longer. And it's true. Now they're rostered in like 75% of leagues. They'll probably be north of 80 if they have a strong week against Green Bay. That's like a set it and forget it defense now. But we got to talk about probably the number one streaming option for us. And this is like, most of you are going to be like, hey, Theo, not in my league, bro, because this defense is rostered in most competitive leagues right now. Got to talk about the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears are only rostered in 59% of Yahoo leagues. The Bears defense is just an absolute unit. They force turnovers. They get to the quarterback continually. They have dudes up front. They have a strong secondary, and they've scored defensive touchdowns this year. So there's a little bit of like a chip on their shoulder type mentality because of the offensive struggles. Bears offense has scored 3 touchdowns in 3 games. Defense is backing them up. They have a really strong matchup this week. Last week, we saw the LA Rams have a wonderful win over the 49ers, 27-24. Guys are stepping up. Tutu Atwell making 50-yard receptions downfield. Stafford leading them back from a probable defeat with a comeback in the fourth quarter. Nail the game-winning field goal. Everybody's happy. But let's look at a little bit of reality check. The Rams are down Cooper Kupp. The Rams are down Puka Nacua. The Rams are down multiple offensive linemen. This is a buzzsaw. The Rams are also going from west to east, or I guess west to Midwest. Chicago is pretty far east, though. This is not a geography show. This is a fantasy football show. But Chicago Bears, if they're available in your league, go grab them. And then you don't have to watch this video every week if you have the Chicago Bears defense, because we're going to roll with them. Extremely underrated defense. I love what the Bears are doing over there on defense, not on offense, but on defense, they're just awesome. Let's talk about another defense that I think things are skewing in their direction, and they've got a little bit of momentum. And this is why we need to look at things with context, and we need to look at things where we're not just looking at the collective stats. We're looking at how teams did last week, and we're looking at what the matchups the teams have in front of them. And we've got to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And every single defensive stat is going to be skewed, where you've got that Brazil game where it was like everything popped off. Green Bay scored a lot of points. Green Bay had a lot of success against that Eagles defense, and that was a shootout. So in a 3-game sample size, that's going to skew elsewhere. But we've seen the Eagles put up 2 solid performances against 2 teams from the NFC South. And the Atlanta one, you're going to say, well, Atlanta marched down the field on them and scored at the end. If you take away that final touchdown, Philadelphia really affected the Atlanta Falcons offense. And Atlanta's struggling, but Philadelphia also stepped up last week, went into New Orleans, completely shut down the Saints. Saints are dealing with some offensive line injuries, and they didn't have Taysom Hill, but that Saints team was averaging 45 points, and Philadelphia held them in check down to 12. So this Philadelphia defense has a lot of youth, and this Philadelphia Eagles defense seems to be gaining a little bit of momentum. We're going to use them this week if we're in a bind. They go up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. Tampa, again, We've seen a decline with this Tampa Bay offense. They've scored 27 points combined over the last 2 weeks. They might be missing Bucky Irving, who's been their most effective runner of the football, averaging six. And this is, again, Bucky Irving is not like, some RB1, but it will affect the way that Tampa Bay moves the football. He's been their most efficient runner. So losing that aspect makes them a little easier to defend. Godwin, Evans, obviously great players. Baker Mayfield at home is a quarterback that we're not like auto fading. But I do think that using Philadelphia this week on kind of a hot streak, when you also factor in that Tampa Bay is the team that ended their season last year. So Philadelphia has a chance to get a revenge narrative game on the road in Tampa Bay. This defense, I think, can affect the Buccaneers. But if you're worried about that one and you want to go with a low-hanging fruit, this defense is available in every single league. Well, not every league, but a lot of leagues. They're available in 76% of Yahoo leagues, and it's the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans are going up against the Miami Dolphins. Again, the Miami Dolphins, Skylar Thompson was horrendous last week. It looks like it's going to be Tim Boyle, possibly Tyler Huntley this week, and nobody knows what's going on with Miami. There is just more panic with Miami than I've seen, like the whole narrative script flip. Last year, Miami averages like 28 points per game. This year, they're averaging 11 points per game. They're a complete mess without Tua Tagovailoa. And this week, they host the Tennessee Titans defense. Both of these teams are projected to have like 19 or 20 points scored. This game is one where I think the Tennessee defense is going to step up and really affect Miami. It's a Monday night football game in Miami, primetime game. And I think this Tennessee defense is one you can use because we're just going to fade that quarterback and we're going to fade Miami because they can't score the ball. One defense who has a very difficult matchup, but I still think you can stream them based on how successful they've been and the rivalry aspect of this game and the home environment is the Green Bay Packers. Depending on your scoring format, Green Bay is probably a top 3 scoring defense in your league. That's something where, like, hey, that's surprising. Green Bay wasn't one in the preseason that we were projecting to give us this sort of defensive output, but it's there. They have 11 sacks on the year. They have 7 interceptions on the year. They have scored a defensive touchdown. Green Bay this week, though, plays against Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. So if you're a little bit nervous about using them against a difficult matchup, I can understand that. But for me, I will lean into the home environment and I will lean on Green Bay being able to affect Minnesota a little bit. Minnesota's on a hot streak, but I think this Green Bay defense is knocking on the door of set it and forget it levels. They're playing very well. And again, they're getting to the quarterback. So that sort of thing at home can affect them. And then if we're looking to chase a game, well, first of all, another defense who is sort of a set it and forget it one, and I'm surprised by the amount of leagues they're available in, New Orleans Saints defense. This team is a machine. They really shut down that Philadelphia Eagles team. They were holding Philadelphia to 0 points heading in the fourth quarter, and then Superman put on his cape, and it was all she wrote. Saquon Barkley ripped off that 65-yard touchdown, and I think that sort of broke the backs of the Saints defense. Saquon scores another touchdown with like a minute to go, and that's pretty much it. They force turnovers, they get to the quarterback, and New Orleans this week faces off against an Atlanta Falcons defense, an Atlanta Falcons offense that, again, is bottom 10 in scoring. This is one where if the Saints are available in your league, go ahead and roster them. It's a rivalry game in Atlanta, but I think that the Saints are just a talented defense. They've got 11 sacks on the year, 5 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. They even blocked a kick. So for me, it's like New Orleans, even though it's an away game, I'm not afraid to use them. So this week, again, it's not like a complete layup. There's some defenses where you're going to have to do a little bit of your own research and sort of your level of comfort with some of these recommendations. But let's go over it once again. Chicago, which is available in 41% of leagues, my number one. And then after that, I think I'm going to go with New Orleans as my number 2. They are available in 55% of leagues. we'll go with the Philadelphia Eagles, available in 56% of leagues. Green Bay Packers, available in 69% of leagues. And then the Tennessee Titans, who are available in 76% of leagues. I think all of these defenses are viable streamers. And if you're looking to, if all of those happen to be rostered, then I think you just chase the opposite side of the Atlanta game, where we've seen Atlanta at home do very well against Pittsburgh. We saw Atlanta hold Philadelphia in check and win that game. I think Atlanta this week, even though New Orleans has had a lot of success in weeks 1 and 2, with the offensive line injuries, I think we can use Atlanta if all those others are available. And the reason I think that Atlanta is going to be available to you is they're available in 95% of Yahoo leagues. They're one where I'm way less excited about using them. This is more of a, if you really need a dart throw defense, rivalry game at home, backs against the wall. Atlanta really needs to win this one. But again, I'm way less excited. They would be like 6th on this list. And every week, I like to give you a couple of defenses that you can stash for the following week. So if you're looking to stash a defense in week 5, there's more than a few. Like week 5 is going to be a much more fun week for us for streaming defenses. My number one defense for you to stash, we're back to the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to avoid using them this week against the Detroit Lions. That game could absolutely pop off in terms of overall scoring. But the Lions gave us, we used them for 3 straight weeks, and we had them, they gave us a 24-3 win over Miami. And then in week 5, they are going to be hosting the New York Giants. Now, Malik Neighbors is dealing with concussion-like symptoms. If Malik Neighbors is out, then Seattle might be the number 1 defense on the entire week. And even if Malik Neighbors plays, this Seattle Seahawks team is really, really good. And you're talking about a team going east to west and having to play in that environment with Daniel Jones on the road. Seattle is a layup. And then we're going to talk about the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are actually sort of red hot as a defense. We saw what they did to Tampa Bay. We saw what they did to Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh game, they just couldn't score, but they were really pretty much shut down that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So Denver is a red hot defense. If you take away that Seattle game in week 1, the numbers look really strong and promising for them. They host Las Vegas in Denver. So that's one where Las Vegas is dealing with a couple injuries. Vegas is not a good football team. That's one where Denver could really tee off. Sean Payton gets a little less heat on him. That's an opportunity for Bo Nix to win a game. And I just like the way this Denver defense looks. And then the last one, New England Patriots, available everywhere. If you want to get ahead of the curve and you think this Miami Dolphins offense is completely heading south, pick up the New England Patriots defense at home in week 5, hosting the Dolphins. Miami has struggled over the years in New England with good teams and good quarterbacks. So how about with a really, really bad one? This is one where the Patriots could tee off and look to get a really big home win. So just to recap the week, your streamers this week: Chicago, Philadelphia, Green Bay, New Orleans, Tennessee, and then if you're in an emergency, the Atlanta Falcons. That's your 5 with like an extra +1 because we love our audience here at Player Profiler. And your 3 stashes for week 5, the Patriots, the Seahawks, the Denver Broncos. I'm Theo Gremminger. Stick with me here at Player Profiler all season long. I'm dropping podcasts. I'm dropping YouTube videos like this. Check out my written work over at playerprofiler.com. We're going to help you crush your leagues this season, and we're going to help you find that edge that you need to win in fantasy. We'll see you soon.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.